Hi, my name's Jenna and I love chickens. We go to this nice lady who gives us lots of advice on our chooks, and we're going to be visiting her.
Hi everyone, I'm here today with Kate Velge, and she's our local chicken lady, everyone calls her. Here's Kate. Now,
Everyone.
we don't have anyone filming today, so I'm here with the camera. Kate's going to give us a little bit of a show around the chooks and talk about some of the popular questions that she often gets asked year after year by people about looking after chickens and managing chickens. So Kate, let's go for a bit of a walk and have a look around.
This is just my vlog of bits of pieces of chickens that I like, and our geese, and there's a couple of ducks, and they're all living in here quite happily.
Yeah.
So, but I think the most important thing is they've got a predator-proof pen at night. And you need to control the access of rodents and things to the food, so you're not getting rat problems and things like that. So you need good feeders. And plenty of water, that sort of thing. If you've got that under control, they're usually pretty happy, because foxes and pythons love chasing chickens. Everyone likes eating chicken.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you really have to make sure that that's looked after. And I find a lot of people with older chook pens, they don't realise they do start to deteriorate a little bit in the chicken wire, and foxes just find the weak point and get in. So you do have to keep maintaining it. And if you're building something new, consider it has to be predator proof. And if you've got an old chook pen, you really need to look at every weak point. And not everyone has python problems, but there are most of Samford does. So,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah.
We had a bit of a python problem. You might have seen some photos last year. We had 3 pythons on the pen in one night.
Yes, that's not fun.
No.
We don't actually have many pythons here, but I know a lot of people have lost chooks to pythons, so you do have to keep an eye on that.
Yeah.
And then I guess the other things to look at is when you're buying new chickens, whether you're getting point of lay or you're buying chicks, or whether you're buying older hens. At the moment, there's a big shortage of chickens, because everyone's decided at once, because of COVID-19, that they're either restocking their chicken coops or getting chickens for the first time. Sorry. So they're a bit hard to get a hold of at the moment. So if you are getting them, the things you need to look at, are you paying for older chickens, or are you getting point of lay, which basically means anything 16 weeks and older that's not laying yet. That doesn't mean they're about to lay. You might still have to wait for a few weeks to get an egg. But at this time of the year, the days are getting shorter, so they'll be slower to come into lay. So you sometimes have to wait till after the winter solstice, after the end of June, to actually get eggs. Because the lengthening daylight actually triggers their hormones to start laying. Where if you buy chickens in the spring, they get to maturity really quickly and start laying quickly. But the ones you buy in autumn will actually be a stronger hen, because they grow out better before they start laying eggs. That's a big question we get asked a lot.
Yeah.
And then if you've got older hens, they will molt in the autumn, lose their feathers, and that allows them they stop laying, so that allows them to grow their feathers back and put some weight on again, getting ready for laying for the rest of the year. But if they keep laying, like a commercial hen is bred to keep laying right through the whole year, so they tend to lose condition and they look scrappy. By the second molt, they tend to have a lot of trouble recovering from that, and sometimes they don't come back into lay, but they've laid solidly for 2 or 3 years before that happens. Where the heritage breeds will go into that molt and stop laying, and then come back into lay each year, just a few less eggs each year as they get older. And then the other way of buying chickens is to buy them as day-old chicks, and so then if you do that, you have to count the rooster factor.
Yes.
If they're not sex chicks, can you cope with the fact that you may have to rehome roosters, or find that they may not get a home, so you have to deal with that side of things. You can buy sex chicks from some places, and that does make it easier, but something else to
Well, we've turned up here a few times.
Yes.
With my daughter, with tears and things happening. Yeah, and that's tears from me, not just my daughter. So, yeah.
So yes, yeah. So there are things to consider. So, and then when you're buying hens, you really need to make sure. I mean, a lot of people think that they can just give them the food scraps, and then expect. I mean, you can feed them basic food, but they won't lay as well. So that's why a balanced layer mash has actually been designed. They know it's got exactly what it needs in there for the hen to lay well. So you'll get more eggs if you feed a balanced layer mash. Something at least 15% in protein. If it's 12% in protein, it's a maintenance diet. So they'll survive on it, and they may not gain weight, and they won't lay as well. So when you're buying laying mash, you're looking for 15%. Some of them will go up to 17, 18%. So anything between 15, you don't want to go too much above that. Sorry. She's not happy about this.
No. Well,
she's actually a broody hen, so I'll talk about that in a minute.
Okay.
So that's a really important factor. For some people, when they buy chickens, they go, I'm not getting any eggs, and they do need to reach a certain weight to actually produce eggs. So if you're not feeding them the right feed, sometimes that can be really slow or very sporadic.
Yeah.
And then the other factor I find is people let their chickens out at daylight, or don't lock them in, and so they start laying eggs all through the garden. My mother never let the chickens out until midday, because they had to do their job first.
Yeah.
They had to produce eggs for the family before they were allowed out, and they were fine. It's not like you're locking them up in a tiny cage. You've got a coop they can wander around in. They're quite okay with that. It's just that you want to be able to find the eggs. So often I've had a lot of people say they're not laying, and then I say, have you looked around? And they'll go in the garden, and then they'll send me a photo of a massive pile of eggs that the chickens have found a stash place in wherever they like to lay, not your nesting box that you've carefully prepared for them. There's actually one hen running around in here who refuses to lay in there. She actually goes to the shed.
Yeah, okay.
And the dog always gets that egg. So
all right.
Yes. So we've covered that, the food, and the other thing you need is shell grit. So basically you buy coarse shell grit from the produce shop. You leave it ad lib, they can take it as they want, but you'll find at different times of year they'll take more. So in summer they might eat more shell grit when they need it versus other times of year, but you always just make sure there's a dish of it or a food container of it somewhere so they can take it if they need it. And that way you help keep the eggshells hard. So yeah.
I've always had a question about, because my chooks I have to always buy a bag of coarse grain and a bag of fine grain and mix it. For some reason they're very picky. But what is the difference between fine grain and coarse grain, and giving that to you?
Coarse layer mash?
Yeah.
It's just how it's been milled. So different mills do things.
So do chickens prefer one over the other, or?
Chickens are almost a little bit OCD, so whatever they're used to, they like.
Yeah.
So they usually don't like big pellets. So when you buy coarse layer mash, often they'll leave the big pellets, and that's where all the extra nutrition is. So if you can I find show breeder, the micro pellets are very good because it's all in those micro pellets, and they're tiny little pellets. Or the red hen 17, it's all it's like a finer mash. You don't have those big pellets for them to deal with.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's whatever they like. So long as they're getting a minimum 15% protein, it's okay. And different flocks, for some reason, they get a set in their mind. Maybe the boss chicken likes something, so everyone else decides to follow.
Yeah.
Not sure.
The other
you don't want, the main one you don't want to do, you don't want to be feeding them just scratch mix, because that's just the maintenance diet. It's just a treat. So throwing some grain out is just a treat. And the big pellets they don't like. I don't think it's nutritionally as good, even though it says it has a 15% protein. I think they have fillers and things in them. I don't think they're as good as the show breeder micro pellets or a good layer mash.
Yeah, okay.
So,
yeah.
Yes. So what else was I going to talk about, Christine? Tell me.
I have lots of questions. Well, some of the questions we've come and asked you, but for people who want to, have organic eggs and be organic on their place, what's some of the management tips you could give us about?
Well, you can buy organic feed. It's just more expensive.
Yeah.
I don't think it necessarily makes the eggs more nutritional, but if organic is what you want, then you can definitely buy organic feed for them, and good quality feed that has the right protein. So that's important. You can manage worms and lice differently. it just means a lot more work.
Yeah.
Because really you'd have to set up some sort of, to manage chickens without having to worm them with a commercial wormer, you really have to set up your permaculture idea where you would move them, every 2 or 3 months onto fresh ground, so they're not like when you have a permanent chicken pen, there are worms. It doesn't matter, the worms are in the ground, so that worm cycle is going to continue. If you have chickens free ranging, you can't stop that.
Yeah.
They will have worms, and they might survive quite. People say, "Oh, well, my chickens look fine," and they might be fine, but when they get hit with a heat wave or a disease, or they get frightened by a fox that tries to catch them and their immune system takes a hit, if they're carrying a head load of worms, it's just one more thing they can't handle.
Yeah.
So a lot of people I know who do mostly organic will just choose to worm them once a year just to deal with that.
Yeah.
But not it's a personal choice really.
Yeah. Okay.
But you would have to segregate, so you'd have your setup where you'd have the, part of your veggie garden is a coop, and you'd move it every 2 or 3 months. You'd make sure they're on a fresh patch of ground to sleep on, and turning over that soil and doing all that sort of thing. Lime is helpful, spreading.
Yes,
lime.
well, that's what we
It's
just
good
did in
for-
ours.
I think it's
So
good
mites
for-
and lice. What's your?
Well, we use the pyrethrum-based, the Fido's dog wash. Just concentrate like you would use for dogs, and we mix it up. It has bird instructions on it, and that's very effective. It doesn't smell too bad. You don't seem to get any reactions from that like you might with some of the stronger things, but it works just as well. I think it's better for the chicken to get get rid of that discomfort.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people use diatomaceous earth and that's fine, but I find that very good for preventative stuff. But actually, if you're itching, you want to get rid of it.
Yeah.
And it's a combination thing. But I guess everyone has to do their. I think you just have to work a little bit harder at it if you want to stay organic.
Yeah.
But it is pretty important to keep on top of lice, and it's not poor management to get lice. They can get them from anywhere.
Well, we tend to get them
turkeys.
when there's a hen sitting on eggs for a
Yeah,
long period,
because
and
they're
she
not getting
can't
up and
dust bath.
bathing, and that's the same thing when you have silky chickens, because they're not very active, so they're not dust bathing as much. They're really vulnerable to lice.
Yeah.
The same as a broody hen, and they'll just sit there and put up with it, and it can be awful.
Yeah.
So you sort of have to keep on. And a diatomaceous earth inside the nesting box at that point would be very helpful, because it would help kill off anything that's trying to crawl on them.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, you're going to talk about this broody hen. Are you going to
hen.
show us something, or?
yes. So I do get a lot of messages saying something wrong with my hen. She won't get out of the nesting box. I pick her up and she just sits on the ground. There's something wrong with her. There's nothing wrong. This one has just decided to go broody this week, even though the weather's cold, so it's a bit out of season. But she was laying, and her comb and wattle, everything were bright red, and now they've gone off. See how they've gone a little bit, they're not as red as they were.
Yeah.
And she's a bit cranky, and she fluffs her feathers up and carries on a lot when you pick her up, and gets a bit cross.
Yeah.
And she just keeps going back into the nesting box. So her hormones have switched to wanting to be broody. So it means her body temperature has turned up a little bit, and then she wants to sit there until some chicks hatch. And that can go on for a long time. So there are ways of dealing with that. You can either give her some fertile eggs, and I recommend people don't just let all the hens lay underneath the broody hen, otherwise without you controlling it, otherwise you end up with chicks hatching on multiple days, and then the hen will only sit for so long, and so she'll leave half-hatched chicks behind. It just gets really messy.
Yeah.
So you're better off to collect all the eggs, and then when you're ready for her to raise chicks, you put them all under her at the same time, because they start incubating on the same day, and then they'll hatch roughly on the same day.
Yeah.
But most people don't really want chicks every time a hen goes broody. So what you can do is either lock them in a different pen, or you can build what they call a broody breaker box. So it's got wire on the bottom. So it's basically mimicking them roosting. So when they're roosting, the air is flowing underneath them, and their body temperature stays cooler. But when they're sitting in the nest, the temperature goes up, and that's what turns the hormone on. So when you build a broody box, and it can just be anything. It can be an old cocky cage, it can be a dog cage. You just put mesh in the bottom so their feet don't fall through, and they've just got food and water in there, and they can stay in there for 3 or 4 days, and that's usually enough to cool their temperature down, and then they're fine to go back with the flock. Some hens are really easy to convince just by locking them out for the day, but some breeds have been bred to go broody, and you'll find the bigger, heavier breeds tend to go broody more, because they were actually bred as a multi-purpose bird. They were supposed to lay a lot of eggs in the beginning, go broody, raise a few batches of chicks, get really fat again, lay some more eggs, and then get eaten themselves, because that's their meat birds as well as, and then whether you're comfortable with that or not. We don't do that with our Sussex and Wyandottes and those big birds, but they do obsessively go broody.
Yeah.
And that's good if you want chicks.
That's right.
So, and there are a lot of, I mean, you could talk for hours about lots of egg issues. I mean, basically you want to look for, if they're happy, and if you look over there, they're all scratching and looking reasonably happy, and yeah. This one here, this one in the front is quite elderly. There's not much I can do for her. She's not really suffering, so I'm watching her, but she's quite elderly and got a few issues, I think. But I catch her every now and again. I think she's okay for the moment, and I worm her regularly, but she's obviously not 100%. But she's happy, she's scratching around and keeping up with the others. So you'll often find, though, that they'll mask problems if they're not well, because they don't like being picked on, which brings me into pecking order.
Yes, okay.
So it is natural for chickens to have a pecking order. They don't, it's nothing, there's nothing mean, but people get upset because, oh, my chickens are being so mean to each other, but that's nature. Yeah. When you're out in nature, if they were wild birds, basically the boss hen would get all the food first. She would get the rooster first, she gets the nest box first, she gets the water first, because it's survival of the fittest. She's the strongest hen, therefore her offspring have the best chance of survival. So basically anything that's weak gets pushed out of the flock or picked on, and then the predators would pick it off, and that's how nature works. So when we bring them into domestic chook yards and then we want them to behave nicely to each other, they don't understand. They just go, no, I'm the boss chook, so I get everything first.
Yeah.
So there'll always be a boss and there's always be a bottom, and there'll often be one that's off to the side that doesn't really care about the pecking order, and it will often go off on its own. It doesn't mean it's unhappy, but you want to just make sure that the bottom chook is not hiding behind the nest box, not get allowed to eat and drink. Sometimes it'll just be dominance over. You can fix the problem with over the dominance over food by just putting more than one food source out. Therefore, she can't keep them off two food sources at one time.
Yeah.
But that's only if it's out of balance. In a normal flock, the boss hen would eat first, and the bottom pecking order would still get to eat the bottom hen. But if it starts to get out of hand and it's a bullying issue, then you can manage it by putting the two feeders out. You can separate hens. Like when you introduce a hen, the easiest way to do it, the least stress, is to put them in a cage within the coop, so they can meet through the wire and no one gets picked on. Poor dogs. No one gets picked on, and then after a couple of days you just integrate them in with the flock, and that usually works. But the other way, a lot of people do it when they want to be easy, they let their existing hens out for the day and lock the new ones in, so the new ones get confident about where to eat and drink, and then at night they let their old hens back in, and they do that for a couple of days, and that allows the new hens to learn where to sleep but not get picked on through the day and feel confident. And once the confidence is up, they're usually okay. It's a lot about confidence. It's a bit like going to a new school.
Yeah. It's a shame they don't have a separate cage
Right.
for people to get used to.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's some of the main things I get asked. And then, I mean, you could go on to lots of health things, but I mean, they're quite specific, so we just...
Yeah, okay.
That's the main...
Like, I guess people can ask questions on the bottom of the video, and we'll get you to jump on and answer a few questions if people have questions.
Yeah.
Is there anything in particular you can show us about? You just mentioned the broody box, or...
I haven't got one because I've got lots of pens here.
Yeah,
so
okay.
I can just lock them in another pen.
Yes, okay.
So that's easy for me. But it's very easy. If you Google it, there's lots of pictures of broody boxes and ideas. It doesn't have to be fancy, it doesn't have to be expensive. It just, I've seen people actually build them on the side of their coop above the nesting box, just sitting up there, so that when one goes broody, they just pop it in there. As long as it's got food and water, it's fine. Or it can just be as simple as some milk crates put together. It doesn't have to be something, I can't build things, so that's not my thing.
Yeah.
And I think at the moment, I can tell anyone, you can just be patient. There will be more hens available. It feels like, no one's got any, but it'll settle down. We're coming into the peak time of availability for hens, so there will be more.
Yeah.
patient.
Yeah.
That's the main thing.
So I'm interested, Kate, have you had chickens all your life?
Growing up, we did.
Yeah.
Mum used to order them from a hatchery. She used to order 6-pointed lay Australorps from the hatchery, and I don't know where that was. And we used to go into town, and they would arrive on the train, and we'd pick them up from the platform in a box and take them home and get them settled in.
Yeah.
But we, in central New South Wales, had so many foxes. It didn't matter what Mum did. Eventually, the foxes got them every year. It was like Fort Knox, but
Yeah, okay.
it was just if there's that, we don't have that as many foxes up here.
Yeah.
So it is easier to keep them safer.
Yeah.
But down there, it didn't matter. There was sheep, there was corrugated iron dug into the ground.
Yeah.
Find a way in eventually.
Yeah.
So that was, and they were lovely hens. And then I probably had a big gap, like when you go to uni and you do all those things, you don't have chickens.
Yeah.
So then we moved back out here, and the first chicken we got was a rooster that was dumped when we were renting a house on the edge of the state forest on the other side of Samford, and people used to dump roosters down there.
Okay. Yeah.
He just came wandering up and ended up, and we had a rooster, so I went, well, let's get some hens.
Oh.
So that's how that happened.
My first hen was a dumped hen too. I was getting ready for school, and I looked out my bedroom window, and there was this hen by itself in the front lawn, frozen. It was the middle of winter, and I ran out and grabbed it and brought it in and sat with it in front of the heater and thawed it out. And strangely, I made a chook pen for it and everything. I think I was probably 12 or 13, and about 2 years later it started laying.
Yep.
So
Happy.
So eventually it became happy.
Took a while
But the stress of wherever it came from, I'm not sure. But yeah.
So, no, and I have to say that's one thing I would rather people did is take responsibility for their roosters and don't dump them.
Yeah.
It must be awful to be a rooster. I mean, they're going to get hunted by something. They're going to be covered in lice and ticks and things.
Yeah.
It's better to either try and rehome them, or if they have to, but it's not kind. I mean, if they can't find a home, at least they're not wandering. They're going to be killed by something.
Yeah.
It's not nice.
No.
So that's anyway. You just want me to let you go, don't you?
You can let it go.
I can feel her squirming, like.
Yeah.
Not one of the quieter hens.
And what about people who might want to plant some things in their garden that chooks are good for chooks? Is there anything you could suggest, plant-wise?
Well, they love mulberry trees are perfect around chicken coops.
Yeah.
Because they lose their leaves in the winter, so you let the sun in. But in summer, they're really cool. Like the one behind you is partly losing leaves. The one you had in the video. It's only like 3 years old, so it's huge. I keep having to cut it back, but in summer it makes that beautiful and cool. And they love to eat the leaves, so when you hack the branches off, they love to eat the leaves. So that's a perfect tree.
Yeah.
It's pretty difficult to grow things around that won't destroy. So whatever you put, you need to make sure that they can't get to it, scratch it out of the ground, and because they will just decimate it. So I have seen people do things like build it, like put mesh over the top of a little garden bed, so all the chooks can do is pick the tops off the herbs and things that they want to eat.
Yeah.
So you need to think about that side of things. When I put fruit trees and all that sort of thing in, you put chicken mesh around the bottom, otherwise they dig out the roots until the fruit tree's big enough that the roots are big enough to deal with the chook scratching.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of stopping them from destroying it. They will just decimate. I'm sure anyone's had chooks get into their veggie garden can attest to.
Yes. Yeah.
So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now you're not. So you've been supplying everyone around the valley and everywhere else with all different types of heritage chooks and things for years now.
Yeah.
But you're not doing that anymore.
No, not on more a small scale. We've just scaled back to being able, we'll have a few for people that have always bought chooks from us or local people. But I just, it's a different stage of life. So. Plus my knees needed a break from shoveling and wheelbarrowing.
Yeah.
Because it's a lot of work. So,
Yeah.
but I'll still breed some in the spring, and we'll have some available for people. And
Yeah,
that's part of what I've enjoyed most, is talking to the people around Samford. It's lovely going. You run into people all the time.
Yeah.
And even with the COVID-19, we're riding our bikes down around Samford, and I kept running into people that I've met through chickens,
Yeah.
and they're riding bikes and walking on the same. It was quite nice.
Yeah,
So,
lovely.
yeah.
Well, personally, I'd like to thank you for all the advice you've given me over the years and my family, and consoled us in terrible times. And I think it's just a wonderful, service and
Well, they bring a lot of pleasure
that you've given to the
I think
community.
they've evolved to live with people, and we've
Evolved to live with them, yeah.
it just, I don't know, they just fit in, and it's just, they give a lot back, not just eggs.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. All right. Great.
thank you.
Thanks,
No
Kate.
worries.
Bye.
Bye.